I am so glad you are here. Follow my story until the end and comment what city you are watching this from. I was lying in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm when the nurse handed me the phone. My knee replacement surgery had gone fairly well, but the recovery was proving to be more difficult than expected. At 68 years old, nothing heals as fast as it used to, a cruel reality that my doctor had warned me about, but one I was not completely prepared for. "Mrs. Cooper," whispered Nurse Margaret Jenkins, her kind eyes crinkling with concern, "your son says it is urgent." I took the phone with trembling fingers, my heart racing. Had something happened to one of my grandchildren? My joint stiff from arthritis ached as I brought the receiver to my ear. "Mom." Zachary's voice sounded as casual as a summer rain. "By the way, I am getting married tomorrow, and your house and car are sold. See you later." The soft beeping of the machines behind me faded beneath the roaring of the blood in my ears. The room tilted slightly. "Excuse me," I said slowly. "What did you say?" He huffed as if I were wasting his time. "The house, the one in your name? Yeah, I took care of it. We needed the money for the new place, and the car is gone too. I signed what I needed to." My mouth fell open. I was not even supposed to be receiving calls yet, but the nurse had handed me the phone, saying your son said it is urgent. Oh boy, was it urgent. He kept talking, his voice getting louder, defensive. "Do not get upset. You were not going to drive again anyway after that little fender bender last fall. And the house was just sitting there with all those stairs you can barely handle. It is better this way. Do not make a big deal out of this." I did not answer. I could not. A wave of dizziness hit me so hard I almost threw up. And then I laughed. I could not help it. The nurse poked her head in alarmed, probably thinking I was having a stroke. I waved her away. Zachary paused. "What is so funny?" I smiled at the phone, my voice as rough as gravel. "Do you really think you sold my house?" Silence. "What?" he snapped. "You think you have it all figured out?" I whispered, still smiling, my heart pounding. "But you did not read the fine print, honey." I hung up. The phone slipped from my fingers and landed on the thin hospital blanket. My hand was shaking. I was not laughing anymore, I was trembling. He had waited until I was at my absolute weakest, still recovering from surgery, still not knowing if I would ever walk properly again. He had not visited me a single time, not one damn time. But somehow he found the time to sell my house. And God knows how he managed to get the paperwork past the notary. Power of attorney. That is what he must have done. Forged it. Probably. The worst part is I was not even surprised. A part of me, the part that remembered his slouched teenage posture and how he always dodged his chores, had expected something like this. But not this soon. Not this sharp. But he had made a mistake. A critical, fatal mistake. He did not know about the clause on the title. The one I had quietly added after my husband Robert passed away. The one my lawyer had suggested back when I still had the energy to be paranoid. He thought he had sold the land, the house, the history, the very soul of our family. But all he really sold was an empty shell. And tomorrow he would walk into his wedding thinking he owned the world. Let him. He would soon find out who really held the deed. The nurse had to help calm me down. I think she thought I was delirious. I was not. I was furious and humiliated. She brought me ice chips and rubbed my shoulder. "Try to breathe slowly," she whispered. "You have had a rough morning." Rough. I shook my head. My only son had sold everything I owned while I was unconscious. That is not rough. That is like a back alley mugging in broad daylight, with a last name that I gave him. I simply nodded and let her fuss over me. My entire body was hot, vibrating with pure anger. But my voice stayed calm because now I was thinking. I stared up at the ceiling with its water-stained tiles, the exact same kind I had seen in every hospital since they wheeled me in to give birth to Zachary in 1976. My son had not always been this way. I remembered when Zachary was little, how he used to crawl into bed with Robert and me during thunderstorms, clinging to his stuffed dinosaur, Mr. Chomps he had called it, how he would bring me dandelions from the front yard, so proud of his little yellow bouquets, his chubby little hands, stained green from the stems. When did that sweet little boy turn into this absolute stranger? Maybe it started after Robert died. My husband's heart attack 7 years ago had hollowed us both out, but in very different ways. I retreated into my grief. Zachary seemed to harden, to become more distant. He is just processing it, everyone would say, but the distance only grew. He had moved to Chicago for work. He called less and less frequently. When he did visit, it was brief. Christmas mornings where he rushed to open presents before heading off to his real celebration with friends. Thanksgiving dinners where he checked his watch between bites of turkey as if spending time with his mother was some tedious chore. And then came the loans. First for his startup that never actually started, then for investments that never saw a return, and finally for the down payment on a condo he could not afford. I had helped him with all of them, pulling from the savings that Robert and I had built over decades of careful planning, skipping vacations, buying used cars, stretching leftovers into creative new meals. "It is just temporary, Mom," he would say. "I will pay you back when things take off." But things never took off. And a year ago, when I finally refused to co-sign another loan, this one for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in some cryptocurrency scheme I did not understand, that was when everything truly changed. The phone calls stopped completely. Not a birthday text, not a Christmas card, absolutely nothing. Until 3 months ago, when he suddenly reappeared with a fiancée I had never even heard of, Olivia Reynolds. Tall, beautiful, ambitious, from a wealthy family that was apparently facing some financial troubles. She looked at our modest house, the one Robert and I had finished paying off twice, after his gambling phase in the 90s, with barely concealed disdain. "It is quaint," she had said. Running a manicured finger along the kitchen counter we had installed ourselves back in 1987. Robert and I working side by side during a sweaty August weekend, laughing when we realized we had measured wrong and had to start all over. Zachary had changed when he was around her. He stood taller, laughed louder, kept looking at her for approval like an eager schoolboy trying to impress his crush. And that was when he first brought up the house. "Mom, you should really consider downsizing," he had said, with Olivia nodding right beside him. "This place is way too much for you to manage all by yourself." I had looked around the home where I raised my son, where Robert and I had celebrated 37 anniversaries, where every single scratch in the hardwood floor held a story. "I managed just fine," I had told him, even though my knees ached on the stairs and the yard work was getting harder every single year. But the seed had been planted, and apparently it had grown into something entirely monstrous. Now lying in this hospital bed, I realized I had missed all the warning signs. The way he had asked me about my filing system, where I kept important documents. How he had offered to organize my paperwork while I recovered from a fall last year. The casual questions about my will, about the current market value of the house. I closed my eyes. The betrayal was not just that he had taken the house, it was that he had planned it so meticulously, all while pretending to care, like taking candy from a baby, except I was no baby, and he was about to learn that the hard way. A year ago, I was sitting in my own living room, the scent of lemon still hanging in the air from my morning cleaning. I had always found deep comfort in household chores, even after Robert passed away a way to maintain order, when everything else felt so chaotic. Zachary had stopped by unexpectedly, which had become a rare event. He leaned forward on the couch, his voice soft and seemingly concerned. "Mom just put the house in my name temporarily. It will really help with the taxes." I had just buried Robert a few years prior. My husband of 34 years, the man I fought with and fought for during most of my adult life. The house felt like a mausoleum back then, silent and echoing, missing his booming laugh, his off-key singing in the shower, his habit of leaving half-finished crossword puzzles on every available surface. Zachary hugged me. It was the first time in months. A real genuine hug, not that awkward side pat he had started giving me once he grew tall enough to tower over me, and I just melted. "I just want to help Mom," he said, pressing his hand over mine. "I want to take some of the weight off your shoulders." My heart broke all over again, but this time from something that felt a lot like hope. He was back. My little boy, the one I had raised. I did not see the fangs hidden in that embrace until much later, because what he really wanted, what he was banking on, was my extreme loneliness, my sheer exhaustion, the part of me that desperately wanted to believe he had changed for the better. I signed the temporary deed transfer that very same week, only I did not stop there. Something about the way he rushed it, the way he insisted there was no need to involve a lawyer, that little itch behind my ear just would not go away. The exact same gut feeling I had when Robert told me his gambling days were behind him right before I found those casino receipts stuffed in his jacket pocket. So yes, I involved a lawyer, very quietly. Samuel Goldstein had been Robert's attorney for decades, a no-nonsense man with kind eyes hiding behind thick glasses who had guided us through Robert's gambling debts and that awful second mortgage. He reminded me of Spencer Tracy in those old black and white movies Robert and I used to watch on classic movie channels. Solid and entirely dependable. "What if he tries to make it permanent?" I asked. Sitting in Samuel's office one week after signing those papers with Zachary, I felt a little foolish even voicing the concern out loud. He was my son after all. Samuel, bless his blunt little heart, did not sugarcoat a single thing. He cannot. Not if we set up the trust the right way. You remain the primary owner. And we write in an ironclad clause that reverts everything straight back to you if anything shady happens. He peered at me over his glasses. "Do you want me to do it?" "Yes," I said. "Do it." I felt a bit ridiculous back then, like I was preparing for an all-out war against my own flesh and blood. But now I realize I was not being paranoid at all. I was finally seeing things clearly for the first time in years. Because when people show you, they are willing to exploit you once it is never a question of if they will do it again. It is a matter of when. And my when had just arrived. Eleanor Washington knew it. She had seen it coming long before I ever did. Eleanor had been my best friend for 40 years, ever since we were young mothers trading babysitting favors and coupon clipping tips. She had been there during Robert's absolute worst gambling binges, during Zachary's rebellious teenage phase, and during the hollow silence that followed Robert's funeral. She had sat at my kitchen table 2 years ago stirring her sweet tea with unusual force. "Marilyn, do not be a fool. Make sure you have a backup deed." I remember laughing, waving off her concern entirely. It is just a temporary name change for tax purposes. Eleanor had narrowed her eyes in that specific way only old friends can pull off, the kind of look that said, "I have seen way too much of life to fall for this nonsense." Her rich brown skin crinkled around her eyes, the exact same expression she wore when she warned me about that slick contractor who tried to double charge me for the roof repairs. There is no such thing. If it is in his name, even partially, it is a wide open door, and one day he might just decide to slam it shut right in your face. Her tone was quiet but deadly serious. So after she left, I called Samuel back. I asked him exactly what a backup deed was. He walked me through the steps one by one, and I followed every single word. I went even further. I also recorded my conversation with Zachary. When he first brought up the deed, I told him it was just for clarity's sake. He laughed and said, "Sure, go right ahead." That audio recording was now sitting safely on a flash drive in my lawyer's filing cabinet, clearly labeled with the date and the exact timestamp. "Just put it in my name for a little while," he had said. "I would never do anything without talking to you first," he had promised. "I just want to make sure you are taken care of," he had claimed. Well, I certainly was taken care of, because I had prepared myself, but that did not mean it did not hurt like hell. I had pictured a very different future once, a son who would stand by my side as I grew older, the same way I had stood by my own mother during her final years, not standing right behind me holding a dagger. But wishes are dangerous things when you start confusing them with actual facts. Nevertheless, I had what truly mattered. A deed, an ironclad clause, a best friend who warned me, and an attorney who never once asked why I did not trust my own flesh and blood. He just helped me slide the deadbolts into place. And now Zachary was standing inside a house he fully believed belonged to him, planning a wedding with a beautiful view he had never actually earned. Let him. Was I going to stop him? Not just yet. Because some life lessons just do not land properly unless they hit you right in front of a giant crowd. That evening, I finally called my lawyer from my hospital bed, not from the front desk phone, not from a nurse's station phone, but from my own cell phone. Eleanor had brought it by with a fully charged battery pack and a warm kiss on my forehead. Samuel and I talked for over an hour. He walked me through every single step all over again. Slow, careful, absolutely no assumptions made. He had learned to do that with me right after Robert's estate got tangled up in messy legalities. I was not the type to just nod along and pretend I understood the legal jargon. I asked questions. I repeated things back to him. I did not care if it made me look a bit slow. I certainly was not. "So let me say this back to you," I told him. "Even if he used a forged or expired power of attorney document, the trust clause we put in completely nullifies his actions." "That is correct," Samuel said. "Because the exact second he transferred the title without your explicit consent, he triggered the revocation clause. You immediately revert to being the sole owner." "And what about the person who bought it?" "The sale does not hold up. It is entirely in doubt. They will have to prove in court that they had no idea the transaction was fraudulent, which will be incredibly difficult, especially if he presented himself as having full undisputed authority. And we have the time-stamped trust documents, the backup deed, and the audio recording of him admitting this arrangement was strictly temporary." "Yes, we have all of it." I let that sink in, watching the IV drip steadily beside me, ticking away the time like a quiet metronome. "You could press criminal charges," he added, "but that is entirely your decision. Fraud, elder abuse, filing forged legal documents. It is all on the table." I looked out the window at the city lights glowing in the distance. I could easily picture Zachary sitting right in my living room, kicking his feet up on the coffee table I bought back in 1987, chatting with his fiancée about wedding caterers or cash flow. It would be so incredibly easy to just destroy it all, but easy is not the same thing as right. "I want to handle this the smart way," I said softly, "not just blindly seek out revenge. I understand. I want absolute peace." There was a brief pause on the line. Then he said, "That is even rarer to find than actual justice, but we will aim for both." I smiled at that. It was my first real smile in days. We discussed the mountain of paperwork, exactly who would be notified, and what specific documents needed to be filed first. I told him I wanted to go down to the title office in person the minute I was discharged. I wanted to see the name change back with my very own eyes. I wanted to feel the heavy weight of the pen right in my hand when I signed those papers. After hanging up, I did not cry, not like I originally thought I would. I just lay there, eyes wide open, watching the pale moonlight creep across the ceiling tiles, listening to the distant hospital sounds, the squeaky wheels of medical carts, muffled chatter from the nurse's station, the steady rhythmic beeping of the heart monitors. There is something incredibly freeing about hearing your absolute worst fear spoken out loud and knowing deep down that you have already done something to stop it. My son thought he was being so slick that he had stolen something I would never be able to get back. But all he really did was remind me exactly who I was before the grief took over, before the deep exhaustion set in. I was a woman who made plans, who listened carefully, who prepared for the worst, even when it broke her heart. And right now, I was a woman, fully ready to take her house back. Dr. Rebecca Chen walked in the very next morning holding her clipboard tight, her white coat perfectly crisp, even at this ridiculously early hour. She reminded me of my very first boss back in 1973. Strictly no nonsense, but always fair. "How are we feeling today, Mrs. Cooper?" she asked, checking over my vital signs. "Much better than I expected," I replied, and I truly meant it. Finally having a solid plan had given me a new surge of strength. "Your recovery is progressing quite nicely. I believe we can start discussing your discharge in just a few days, provided you have adequate support at home, of course." She peered at me over her glasses, looking very much like Samuel. "Do you have anyone who can assist you? Your son, perhaps?" I almost burst out laughing, but I managed to hold it in. My good friend Eleanor has generously offered up her guest bedroom until I am fully recovered. Dr. Chen nodded approvingly, jotting down a quick note. "Good. You are going to need some serious assistance navigating stairs, using the bathroom, and getting transportation to your physical therapy sessions. The first few weeks are absolutely crucial for proper healing." While she lectured me on recovery protocols and pain management strategies, my mind was miles away, quietly assembling the final pieces of my own complicated puzzle. I needed to be physically strong enough to face what was coming next. Not a single judge would ever take me seriously if I showed up looking frail, weak, or easily confused. Dr. Chen interrupted my thoughts. "I need to be able to walk right into a government office completely unassisted in exactly 2 weeks. Is that actually possible?" She paused, studying my face carefully. "With a walking cane." "Yes. Without one, you would be pushing it far too much. May I ask why?" "Pressing legal matters that simply cannot wait," I said plainly. She nodded slowly. "Then we will adjust your physical therapy routine accordingly. But please do not overexert yourself. Recovery is never a race." "This one certainly is," I muttered under my breath. After she left the room, I pulled out my cell phone once again and dialed Eleanor. He did what... Eleanor's voice rose to such a high pitch that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. She had always been the far more vocal one between the two of us, incredibly quick to anger, but equally quick to forgive. A fiery counterpoint to my much calmer, quieter nature. I told her absolutely everything. The phone call, the house being sold, the car disappearing, the sudden wedding. "That boy needs a good hard smack upside the head," she ranted. "Do you want me to drive over there right this second? I will give him a huge piece of my mind. At 70 years old, I have absolutely nothing left to lose." "No," I said firmly. "We are doing this my way. Clean, strictly legal, completely drama-free. At least not just yet." "Fine," she huffed. "But I am going to grab your spare key from under the porch planter and collect your important documents before he throws them in a shredder. Is there anything specific you need me to grab?" I thought about it for a second. The big photo album from the hallway closet. The blue one filled with all the beach trip pictures. My jewelry box from the master bedroom, the real one tucked safely behind the Jane Austen books, not that cheap decoy box sitting out on the vanity, and grab my original birth certificate from the little fireproof lockbox shoved under the bed. Consider it done. Eleanor paused for a moment. He really thought he could just get away with this, did he not? He still firmly believes it, I said, and that is exactly what makes this next part so incredibly necessary, which is letting him walk straight into the giant trap he set for himself. After hanging up the phone, I requested a formal consultation with the hospital's social worker. I needed to cover all of my bases to make absolutely certain that no one could ever claim I was making massive legal decisions while under duress or heavy medication. I needed documented witnesses to my mental clarity, to my unwavering determination. The social worker, a bright young woman named Brenda Taylor, took incredibly detailed notes as I slowly explained my dire situation in very careful, highly measured terms. I am deeply concerned about a potential case of elder financial abuse, I told her. I would like to thoroughly document my current mental state and my legal capacity to make my own decisions. Brenda's eyes widened just a fraction, but her voice remained perfectly professional. Of course, Mrs. Cooper, we can certainly assist you with that. Would you like me to arrange a full psychological evaluation as well? It would significantly strengthen your legal case. Yes, please, I said, as soon as humanly possible. She nodded, making yet another note on her pad. And have you strongly considered filing for a temporary restraining order? Given the severity of these circumstances, it might be highly advisable. I thought about it. A restraining order would instantly tip Zachary off that I was fighting back. No, it was much better to just let him think he had won the war. Not at this exact moment, I said, but I truly appreciate having the option on the table. By the time my bland, tasteless lunch arrived, hospital chicken and severely overcooked vegetables that strongly reminded me of a public school cafeteria circa 1965, I had a crystal clear path laid out right in front of me. Number 1, complete my physical therapy with enough solid progress to walk with only minimal assistance. Number 2, obtain bulletproof medical documentation proving my mental competency. Number 3, meet with Samuel in person to file the quiet title action. Number 4, legally freeze any and all financial proceeds stemming from the fraudulent home sale. Number 5, move temporarily into Eleanor's house while the messy legal process played itself out. All of this had to be done without giving Zachary a single clue. This was no longer just about getting revenge. It was about finding true justice. It was about standing tall and declaring, I am not invisible, I am not disposable, and I am certainly not finished. While I picked at my sad lunch, my phone buzzed with a quick text message from Eleanor. I have got everything. Also, there is a giant real estate sign sitting in your front yard with the word sold stamped right across it. Blood pressure rising. Fighting off the sudden overwhelming urge to commit light vandalism, I smiled a very grim smile. Let him proudly advertise his own crime. It would only make his inevitable downfall that much more public. Another text message chimed in. Wedding is tomorrow at Lakeside Gardens. Very small ceremony according to the nosy neighbor next door. The reception is happening at your house right after. The absolute nerve of that boy. My hand tightened hard around my phone, using my very own house to host his wedding reception without even telling me. That was an entirely new, depressing low even for a boy like him. But I forced myself to just breathe, to think clearly. This was not just about losing a house or a car anymore. It was about a son who had actively decided that his own mother was nothing more than an annoying obstacle, a mere resource to be bled dry, a human life to be casually discarded. And that brutal realization hurt so much worse than the deep surgical incision sliced into my knee. But I would not let that raw pain drive my actions. I refused to let it turn me bitter or vindictive. I would use it as pure fuel for the very long road ahead. A road that led straight back to my own home, my personal dignity, and perhaps one sweet day to a massive reckoning that would finally teach my son the exact lesson I had apparently failed to instill in him. That family is never something you just use. It is something you honor. That mothers are not pieces of property. They are living, breathing people. And that some deep debts can never, ever be repaid with simple cash. As the warm afternoon light filtered right through the plastic hospital blinds, I closed my tired eyes and pictured my house. The peeling white paint on the back porch, the squeaky third step on the staircase, the little kitchen window that never quite managed to close all the way. It was far from perfect, but it was mine. And very soon, it would be mine all over again. I just needed to be incredibly patient. and patience was one thing that old age had taught me remarkably well. The nurse walked in, carrying my evening medication, flashing a sympathetic smile. "Try to get some real rest, Mrs. Cooper. Your body really needs to heal." I nodded gently, accepting the tiny paper cup filled with pills. "I will." But as I swallowed the medication down, I knew deep in my soul that true healing would never come from strong pharmaceuticals or grueling physical therapy. It would only come from aggressively reclaiming exactly what was mine, and from knowing without a shadow of a doubt that I was not nearly as helpless as my son foolishly believed, not by a long shot. 10 days after my surgery, Eleanor wheeled me right up to her modest ranch-style house, the late afternoon sun casting long, dark shadows across her perfectly manicured front lawn. My heavy stack of hospital discharge papers crinkled loudly in the tote bag hanging off the handles of my wheelchair. "Home sweet home," she loudly announced. "Well, at least until we manage to get your real home back." The messy transition from the hospital straight to Eleanor's house had been an absolute whirlwind of discharge paperwork, pharmacy prescriptions, and incredibly stern instructions from Dr. Chen about not pushing my physical recovery too hard. My freshly operated knee still throbbed with every single beat of my heart, but the absolute worst of the agonizing post-operative pain had finally started to fade away. Her cozy guest bedroom had been completely transformed. A heavy-duty hospital-grade bed now replaced her usual antique four-poster frame. Sturdy safety grab bars had been freshly installed in the attached guest bathroom. My absolute favorite throw blanket from my own living room, successfully rescued during Eleanor's top-secret undercover mission, lay neatly folded right at the foot of the bed. "You really did not have to do all of this for me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Eleanor loudly scoffed. "What else was I supposed to be doing with my time take up competitive skydiving? Now hush up and just let me take good care of you." That was just classic Eleanor. Incredibly practical love wrapped up tightly in a strict, no-nonsense package. We had simply been through way too much together over the years to waste our precious time on fake modesty or polite little protests. She carefully helped me get settled in, quietly unpacking the very few personal belongings I had brought from the hospital and neatly arranging all of my prescription bottles on the wooden nightstand. The dull pain radiating in my knee pulsed constantly, a brutal, inescapable reminder of my current physical vulnerability. But my sharp mind actually felt clearer and more focused than it had in months. "So how exactly was the wedding?" I finally asked. As we sat together in her bright, sunny kitchen with 2 steaming mugs of hot tea resting right between us, Eleanor's mouth tightened into a thin line. "Incredibly tacky, completely rushed. The groom looked like he desperately wanted to be absolutely anywhere else on earth, and the blushing bride, Olivia." Eleanor aggressively stirred her hot tea. She was all fake smiles, but you could tell she is incredibly calculating. I stayed way in the back. I did not introduce myself to anyone. I really just wanted to see exactly what kind of mess we are dealing with here. And honestly, I firmly believe she is the main driving force behind all of this nonsense. The specific way she kept pointing at things inside your house during the reception, bragging to random people about her grand renovation plans, looking like she simply could not wait to tear the whole place down to the studs and start completely over. I nodded slowly. That perfectly matched the terrible impression I had quickly formed during our one very brief encounter about 3 months ago. "There is more to the story," Eleanor said firmly, setting her metal spoon down. I did a little digging online. Her father, Marcus Reynolds, owns the Reynolds Development Group. He used to be a massive player in local commercial real estate, key phrase there being used to be. He had 3 massively failed building projects right in a row, rumors circulating about impending bankruptcy. Then all of a sudden, his lovely daughter marries your son, and they magically have plenty of cash to blow on a wildly lavish wedding. The missing pieces snapped into place like some kind of morbid jigsaw puzzle. They needed my house. I muttered quietly, to bail her father out of deep financial trouble. Eleanor nodded grimly. That is my best guess anyway. And Zachary desperately wanted to impress his shiny new in-laws. I finished the thought, to prove to them that he could actually deliver. My hot tea slowly grew cold as we sat there in heavy silence, quietly processing the staggering depth of this ultimate betrayal. This was not just about basic greed or lazy convenience. It was coldly calculated. It was a ruthless business transaction where my beloved home, my entire life's work, was treated as nothing more than cheap collateral. "So what do we do right now?" Eleanor finally asked. "We stick to the plan," I said, reaching across the table for my cell phone. "Step number 1. We find out exactly what is going on with that fraudulent property sale." I dialed Samuel's number, immediately putting him on speakerphone. "Marilyn," he warmly greeted me. "Perfect timing. I have been doing some serious digging around today. The official deed transfer is unfortunately already being processed by the county, but I do have some excellent news. That special trust mechanism we smartly put into place has automatically flagged the entire transaction as legally disputed. They cannot transfer a clean title just yet." "What about the actual money?" I asked. "The initial down payment has already been wired directly into a joint checking account that Zachary opened very recently. We can completely freeze that specific account with an emergency court order that I have actually already drafted up. I just need your physical signature on it." "You will have it first thing tomorrow morning," I promised. "What about the supposed buyers? Who exactly are they?" Samuel hesitated for a second. "Well, that is right where this gets incredibly interesting. It appears to be a purely inside transaction. Your son essentially sold your house directly to his brand new father-in-law's struggling company." My hand tightened sharply around the plastic phone case. "So the property never even hit the open real estate market?" "No, it did not. And they severely undervalued the home on paper. Based on recent comparable properties sold right in your neighborhood, they listed it at roughly 70% of its actual fair market value. A fast, dirty, under-the-table deal. The sharp sting of betrayal flared up all over again. He had not just stolen my precious home, he had practically given the place away just to score cheap points with his wealthy new in-laws. "Can we actually prove the fraud in a court of law?" I asked. "With what we currently possess, absolutely. The expired power of attorney document, the ironclad trust provisions, the audio recording of him openly admitting the arrangement was strictly temporary, the wildly undervalued sale price, and the blatant family connection between the seller and the buyer. This is a textbook legal case." I took a very deep, shaky breath. "Then let us do this the right way." After I hung up the phone, Eleanor quietly studied my face from across the wooden table. "You are handling this whole mess way better than I ever would." I offered her a very tired, worn-out smile. "Please do not confuse my outward calm for actual inner peace. I am absolutely furious. But I learned a very long time ago that white-hot anger is really only useful when it is perfectly focused. And my focus right now is as sharp as a laser beam." The very next morning, I fiercely insisted on doing my painful physical therapy exercises before Eleanor drove me downtown to Samuel's law office. Every single bend of my swollen knee sent agonizing pain shooting right down my leg, but I just kept pushing through it. I desperately needed physical strength for whatever was coming next. Inside the fancy law firm, I signed legal paperwork until my hand cramped up completely. Sworn affidavits confirming I never once authorized the sale emergency requests to immediately freeze the stolen proceeds, a formal criminal complaint detailing the fraud and the heavy, quiet title action that would ultimately restore my rightful ownership. "This is truly just the very beginning of the fight," Samuel firmly warned me. "It could easily get very messy. Zachary is going to fight back hard the absolute second he realizes what is actually happening here. Let him try." I boldly declared signing my name on the final legal document with a dramatic flourish. I have been fighting tough battles for a lot longer than he has even been alive. On our way out the heavy glass doors, Samuel handed me a very thick manila folder filled with copies of absolutely everything. "And take this," he added, passing me a much smaller envelope. "This is your brand new power of attorney document. It legally names Eleanor as your sole agent, completely removing Zachary. Please keep it extremely safe." Sitting in the parked car, Eleanor looked right at me. "Are you absolutely sure about doing this, making me your legal proxy instead of your own son? There is not a single person on this earth that I trust more than you," I said simply. Her dark eyes sparkled briefly with unshed tears, before she quickly blinked them away to hide her emotion. "Well, that is just perfect. Now let us go get your house back." But first, we had to do a little bit of digging. Back at Eleanor's place, we sat down together at her big dining room table with her shiny laptop flipped open right between us. Silly social media apps would easily tell us exactly what the slow official channels simply could not. "Look at this," Eleanor said quickly, spinning the glowing screen toward me. "It is Olivia's Instagram page. It is all flashy wedding photos and fancy honeymoon pictures posted straight from Cabo." I leaned forward, carefully studying the bright images. My son dressed in a crisp white linen suit, looking deeply tanned and incredibly smug. Olivia wearing a flowing beach dress, expensive designer sunglasses, perched right on her perfect little nose, posing for a fancy champagne toast at sunset. "Scroll down further," I quietly muttered. Eleanor did just that, and right there it was. A massive album of photos from the wedding reception. Inside my house, my cozy living room completely transformed with tacky white flowers and cheap fairy lights, total strangers sitting right on my couch, sipping alcohol from crystal glasses that were definitely not mine, and a sickening caption that made my blood absolutely boil. "First lovely dinner in our brand new home together. I simply cannot wait to completely renovate this incredibly outdated space. Newlywed life. So blessed. Fresh start." Eleanor quickly slammed the heavy laptop shut the second she saw the dark expression on my face. That is more than enough digital research for one day. But it was not nearly enough for me. I desperately needed to know absolutely everything. Every tiny detail, every secret plan, every single lie they had boldly told. "I need to see those official sale documents," I firmly stated, the exact legal words that Zachary used. Eleanor hesitated. "Samuel said he would request the official copies for us. That is nowhere near fast enough." I pushed myself up to stand, completely ignoring the sharp pain shooting through my bad leg. "We are going down to the county clerk's office right now." "Marilyn, please be reasonable. You literally just got out of the hospital." "And my own son literally just sold my house right behind my back. Tell me which one of us is actually being unreasonable here." She let out a heavy sigh, but she reached for her car keys anyway. "Fine, but you are absolutely using that wheelchair." The local county clerk's office was freezing cold and incredibly sterile, with cheap fluorescent lights buzzing loudly right above our heads. I sat stiffly in the folding wheelchair. Eleanor stood protectively right behind me while the bored clerk typed away searching for the public records. The Cooper residence, 1887 Maple Street. The tired clerk confirmed, dropping a thin file folder onto the counter. "The property sale was officially recorded just last week. Do you ladies need copies printed?" "Yes, please," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly steady, despite the massive wave of fury building up inside of my chest. The slow clerk ran off the cheap photocopies while I patiently waited, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I was the absolute picture of polite composure on the outside, but violently raging, like a terrible storm on the inside. Once we finally got our hands on the stamped documents, Eleanor quickly wheeled me over to a quiet little corner where we could examine them in peace. The very first thing I noticed was the fake signature. a somewhat decent forgery of my own name scribbled right on the seller's line. The second thing I noticed was the listed sale price. $275,000 for a historic house that was worth at least $400,000 in today's hot real estate market. And then I finally saw it printed right on the very last page of the legal contract. The seller hereby confirms that the property is entirely free of all liens and encumbrances and holds a perfectly clear title to convey. An absolute bold-faced lie. The ironclad trust we had legally established automatically created a massive lien that Zachary had very deliberately hidden from everyone. "We caught him," I fiercely whispered. Eleanor squeezed my shoulder tight. "Let us take this straight back to Samuel." On the long car ride back to the house, my cell phone suddenly buzzed with a new text message from an unknown number. "Why are there random county officials poking around our house? What exactly did you do?" Olivia. It absolutely had to be her. I did not even bother to reply. Let her sit there and wonder. Let her panic and worry. Let her finally start asking the tough questions she really should have asked long before the wedding day. Like why her brand new husband never once bothered to mention that his own mother still legally owned the house they were currently living in. By the time we finally made it back to Eleanor's driveway, Samuel already had some major updates. The financial funds are officially frozen, he confidently confirmed over the phone. The entire $275,000 is completely locked in legal limbo until the federal court decides, and I have successfully filed an emergency injunction to completely block any renovations or physical alterations to the property, at least while the legal ownership remains heavily disputed. "Excellent work," I said. "So what happens next?" "The preliminary court hearing is scheduled for next week. It is mostly just standard procedure, but it would really help our case if you could be physically present in the room. It shows the judge that you are incredibly serious and fully competent." "I will absolutely be there," I firmly promised, "even if Eleanor has to push me in right in this wheelchair." After hanging up the phone, I leaned back hard into the soft recliner. I was suddenly bone-deep exhausted. The wild rush of pure adrenaline that had kept me going all day long was rapidly fading away, leaving behind a profound tiredness and aching pain. Eleanor brought me a strong pain pill and a tall glass of ice water. "You did incredibly well today. Now get some real rest." As I slowly drifted off to sleep, I thought about my house, not as a piece of real estate or a financial investment, but as a true home. The exact place where I had raised my little boy, deeply loved my husband, and built my entire life. The warm kitchen where I taught Zachary how to flip pancakes, and the grassy backyard where he finally learned how to ride his first bicycle. How could he just sell off all of those precious memories so easily? And why had I never seen this massive betrayal coming? Those heavy answers would just have to wait. For right now, I needed to heal to gather my fading strength, because the real ugly battle was only just beginning. 3 days later, I was sitting right back inside Samuel's fancy office this time, carefully reviewing the highly detailed legal strategy he had put together. The massive pile of documents spread out across his polished mahogany desk told a very compelling tragic story of blatant fraud and severe elder abuse. "Filing a quiet title action is our absolute main focus right now," Samuel slowly explained, pointing a pen at a very thick legal brief. "This is a standard legal procedure used to firmly establish the true ownership of a property whenever there is a serious dispute. Given the sheer mountain of hard evidence we have collected, the court will rule heavily in your favor." "How long will this process take?" I asked. "Typically, it drags on for several long months, but given the extreme circumstances, the forged legal documents, the totally expired power of attorney, and the clear trust provisions, we have formally requested an expedited consideration. It could potentially be resolved in as little as a few short weeks." Eleanor, sitting tensely right beside me, deeply furrowed her brow. And in the meantime, those two just get to keep living right inside her house. Samuel nodded grimly at her. Unfortunately, yes, they do, but they absolutely cannot make any permanent structural changes. They cannot sell it. They cannot take out any sneaky loans against it. The property is essentially locked down tight. What about my stolen car? I finally asked. That one is a bit more complicated. Vehicle title transfers are notoriously difficult to completely reverse once they are finished. But since it was a direct part of the exact same fraudulent scheme, we have included it in our massive legal filing. Best case scenario, you get the car right back. Worst case scenario, you receive full monetary compensation for its current blue book value. I nodded. Processing this new information, I realized the car was far less important than the house, but the core principle still remained exactly the same. It was mine, and it was taken entirely without my permission. What are we doing about the actual cash? Eleanor sharply asked. The proceeds from the fake sale are currently frozen solid, Samuel confidently confirmed. Neither Zachary nor the Reynolds family can access a single penny of it. After the judge finally decides the case, assuming we win, and I am incredibly confident that we will, those frozen funds will be kicked straight back to the Reynolds Investment Trust, and your stolen property immediately reverts right back to you. And what about Zachary? I asked in a very quiet voice. What exactly happens to him? Samuel slowly took off his thick glasses, polishing the lenses with a small cloth. That depends entirely on what you want to do, Marilyn. Legally speaking, what he did perfectly constitutes major fraud, blatant forgery, and quite possibly severe elder abuse. Those are very heavy criminal charges that could easily result in actual prison time. My heavy heart tightened painfully in my chest. Despite absolutely everything he had done to me, the very thought of my own child rotting in a cold prison cell made me feel physically sick. Let us just focus on getting the house back first, I said softly. Can we decide on the criminal charges later on? Samuel nodded slowly, a deep look of understanding shining in his kind eyes. Of course we can, but you need to be completely prepared. Once we file these specific legal papers, this becomes a matter of public record. The Reynolds family has deep political connections in this city. This could get incredibly ugly. It is already ugly, I stated firmly. I just want the honest truth to finally come to light. After finishing up the massive stack of paperwork, we drove straight down to the county recorder's office to officially file the heavy, quiet title action. The board clerk, a completely different person from our previous visit, stamped the thick stack of documents with practiced robotic efficiency. Property dispute. He flatly noted, barely even bothering to look up at us. The residential property will be officially flagged in our computer system. Absolutely no title transfers or bank loans can be processed until the final legal resolution. How exactly will the current occupants be notified? I asked him. An official legal notice will be mailed out within 48 hours. They will have exactly 30 days to file a response. 48 hours. In just 2 short days, Zachary would finally know that I was fighting back with everything I had. I actually felt strangely calm about the whole thing now. Our very next stop was the local bank branch, where I had proudly done all of my business for over 40 long years. Welcome to our story, family. Let's get right into today's story. Walter Thompson. The branch manager greeted me with a look of genuine concern. Mrs. Cooper, I am so sorry to hear about your surgery. How is your recovery going? Well enough to ask a few important questions, I replied. I need to understand exactly what happened to my accounts recently. Walter's expression shifted subtly. Let me pull up your information. He typed on his keyboard for a brief moment, then he frowned deeply. There was a significant withdrawal 3 weeks ago. It says here it was authorized by power of attorney. May I see the documentation that was used? I asked. He hesitated. I would need to check with the legal department first. I understand. Please do so. In the meantime, I would like to freeze all of my remaining accounts immediately. His eyebrows shot up. May I ask why? Because that power of attorney was expired, I said calmly, and I believe fraud has been committed. All the color drained from Walter's face. I will make those phone calls right away, Mrs. Cooper. As we walked out of the bank, Eleanor squeezed my arm. You were absolutely magnificent in there. You did not even raise your voice. I learned a long time ago that quiet authority works much better than screaming, I said, especially for women our age. If you raise your voice, you are just a hysterical old lady. If you speak calmly, they have to listen. Eleanor laughed out loud. The wisdom of age. That evening, we continued our investigation into the Reynolds family with Eleanor's help. I scrolled through business news articles and online property records. Look at this, Eleanor said, pointing to a news story from 6 months ago. Reynolds Development Group lost a major contract for a shopping mall project. Their stock plummeted 40% in a single day. And look at this one, I added, pulling up a more recent article. Unexpected recovery, new capital investment, sources close to the family indicate a strategic partnership. The timeline matched up perfectly. Right around the time Zachary started dating Olivia, her father's company began to stabilize. And now, with my house sold at a below-market value to their family trust, they had a major asset they could leverage. They used him, I murmured, and he used me. Eleanor closed the laptop. Everyone is just using everyone. What an absolute mess. Not everyone, I said, reaching over to take her hand. I have you. She smiled, giving my fingers a tight squeeze. You bet you do. I could not sleep that night. I lay in the rented hospital bed Eleanor had set up for me, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, thinking about my son. Where had I gone wrong? Had I been too lenient after Robert passed away? Was I too generous with financial help whenever he struggled? Or had something broken inside him a long time ago, something I had failed to notice or fix? The question spun around in my head, endlessly offering no satisfying answers. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text message from an unknown number. This is Olivia Cooper. We need to talk. Tomorrow, just the two of us. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. After all this time now, she wanted to talk. I typed back, Eleanor's house, 2 p.m. The reply came through immediately. I will be there. I set the phone down, wondering what this new development meant. Was it a trap or an attempt at reconciliation? Or was Olivia finally starting to realize exactly what kind of man she had married tomorrow would tell? The morning brought a flurry of activity. Eleanor insisted on deep cleaning her already spotless house, muttering under her breath about entitled rich girls with their critical eyes. I focused on my appearance. I chose a modest navy blue dress, put on the pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 30th anniversary, and styled my hair neatly. I wanted to look composed and dignified. I refused to look like a victim. At exactly 2 p.m, the doorbell rang. Eleanor answered it, her voice echoing down the hallway. She is in the living room. You have 30 minutes. I will be in the kitchen. Olivia stepped into my line of sight, and I was taken aback by how different she looked compared to her wedding photos. The radiant bride was completely gone. This woman looked incredibly tense. Her designer clothes were slightly wrinkled, and dark circles were clearly visible underneath her carefully applied makeup. Mrs. Cooper, she said stiffly, thank you for seeing me. Please have a seat, I said, gesturing to the armchair across from me. And it is Marilyn. She perched on the very edge of the cushion, clutching her expensive handbag against her chest like a shield. I will get straight to the point. There are people from the county claiming there is an issue with our house. My house, I corrected her gently. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together. Zachary told me you signed everything over, that you wanted to downsize. Did he show you those documents? Did you actually see my signature? I asked. She hesitated. Well, no, he took care of all the paperwork. Did you never think to ask why I was not at the wedding? I pressed. Why I was never consulted about using my home for the reception. Why I was lying in a hospital bed while you were busy planning renovations. Olivia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. He said you were a difficult woman. He said you did not approve of us and that it was better this way. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. Olivia, I never signed a single thing. I never approved any sale. Zachary used an expired power of attorney and forged my signature while I was recovering from knee surgery. All the color left her face. That is not possible. He would not do that. And now the sale is under investigation for fraud. I continued. The money has been frozen. The title is officially in dispute. She stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth across Eleanor's floral rug. No, this cannot be happening. My father's company has already incorporated the property into their development portfolio. We've already started the design plans for the remodel. The board meeting is next week. And there it was, the exact confirmation of what we had suspected all along. Tell me something, Olivia, I said softly. Did you marry my son because you loved him or because your family was desperate for assets? She spun around to face me, absolute fury flashing in her eyes. How dare you? Our relationship is none of your business. It became my business the moment you took my house, I replied calmly. When you planned to bulldoze the home where I raised my son without even having the decency to ask me. Her tough exterior cracked just a little. It was not like that, not at the beginning. Zachary pursued me. He was relentless. He told us he had family money and real estate. My father was incredibly impressed. And when did you figure out that was not exactly true? I asked. She sank back into the armchair, looking visibly deflated. After we got engaged, my dad did some digging. He found out that all of Zachary's business ventures were complete failures. But by then, she twisted her large diamond ring anxiously. By then, my dad really needed the property. His firm was in deep trouble. Zachary promised he could deliver it. He said his mother was more than happy to help out. And you actually believed him? I asked. Why wouldn't I? He is your son. The irony was almost too much to bear. I had trusted Zachary simply because he was my own flesh and blood, all while he was actively stabbing me in the back. Where is he right now? I asked. Chicago. He said he had a business meeting. Her tone strongly suggested she did not buy that excuse for a second. He took off yesterday right after the county officials showed up. He promised he would handle it. I nodded, completely unsurprised. Zachary had always been the type to run away from his problems instead of facing them head on. What happens now? Olivia asked, her voice shrinking. Now the legal process takes its proper course. The house reverts back to me. The funds go back to your family's trust, and everyone has to face the harsh consequences of their own actions. Are you going to press charges against Zachary? It was the million-dollar question, one I still did not have a clear answer to. That really depends, I said carefully. It depends on what happens next. Olivia stood up, pulling her composure back around herself like a protective shield. I should probably get going. Before you leave, I said, I want you to understand one thing. This is not about money or real estate. Not really. It is about basic respect. It is about recognizing that I am still a human being with rights and feelings. That is something both you and my son seem to have completely forgotten. She paused at the doorway, unable to fully meet my eyes. For whatever it is worth, I truly am sorry. I honestly did not know. But you never bothered to ask either, I pointed out. You looked at an old woman and you just assumed she was irrelevant. She had no response to that. After she left, Eleanor emerged from the kitchen. Well then, what did little Miss Perfect have to say for herself? I recounted the entire conversation, watching Eleanor's expression shift from pure outrage to sweet vindication. So the house was going straight into the Reynolds development portfolio, she mused, probably to prop up their assets and make the company look more stable on paper. Using my home as a corporate prop, I said bitterly, without a single thought about what it meant to me. Eleanor sat down next to me, taking my hand in hers. So what is next? Do you think Zachary will come crawling back when he realizes his big plan completely failed? I looked out the window at the fading afternoon light. No, he will blow up. He will blame me. That is his usual pattern. Whenever things go wrong, it is never his fault. And Olivia, does she have some choices to make about what kind of person she wants to be, about whether her marriage is even worth saving? And what about you? Eleanor asked gently. What choices do you have to make? I thought about them. Choices about criminal charges, about forgiveness, about the future of my relationship with my only son. One step at a time, I finally said. First we get the house back. Then we see what is left to rebuild. Later that evening, Samuel called with a major update. The hearing is scheduled for next Monday, he said. It is mostly procedural, but the judge will likely issue temporary orders regarding the property. Can you be there? I wouldn't miss it for the world, I assured him. How are you holding up Marilyn? The official notices were served today, to the property and to the email address on file. I was sitting quietly in Samuel's office the next morning, watching the sunlight filter through the blinds in dusty ribbons. A single envelope rested on the desk between us. My name was written across it in Zachary's familiar, rushed handwriting. Do you want some privacy? Samuel asked. I nodded and he stepped out, pulling the door shut softly behind him. For a long moment, I just stared at the envelope. A part of me wanted to tear it open immediately. Another part wanted to burn it without reading a single word. What could Zachary possibly say to justify what he had done to me? Finally, I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Mom, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Do not bother looking for me, okay? You always thought I was a massive failure, and now I guess I have proved it to you. The house was just sitting there, empty equity you refused to tap into. I needed it. Olivia's family needed it. You never understood what it feels like to be drowning in expectations you cannot possibly meet. Maybe someday I will send you the money to make up for it. Maybe not. Either way, we are done. No apologies, no remorse. Just endless blame and self-pity. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. A strange sense of calm washed over me, the last lingering sliver of doubt, the hope that maybe there had been some massive misunderstanding, some explanation that could partially absolve him, was completely gone. My son had chosen his path. When Samuel walked back in, I handed him the letter without a word. He read it over quickly, his expression darkening. Well, this certainly does not help his case. No, I agreed quietly, but it definitely clarifies mine. What do you mean? I want to press charges, all of them. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse. Whatever applies, and I want it on the official record. Samuel nodded slowly. I will get the paperwork started. But Marilyn, you need to know, even with charges filed, tracking him down might be very difficult. If he has skipped the country, I understand, but I need to do this. Not out of revenge, but for accountability. So the truth is officially recognized. So the record shows that what happened to me was wrong, and that I fought back. As I walked out of Samuel's office with the letter tucked safely in my purse, my phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Court document arrived. Hearing bumped up to tomorrow. Judge Hannigan, 9 a.m. Things were moving much faster now. The momentum was building. Tomorrow I would stand before a judge and formally begin the process of taking my home back. But first, I needed to see it. Are you absolutely sure this is a good idea? Eleanor asked as she drove me across town toward Maple Street. It might be really upsetting to see what they have done to the place. I need to know, I said simply. I need to see it with my own eyes. She sighed heavily but did not argue any further. As we turned onto my street, the familiar row of massive oak trees welcomed me home. Houses I had known for decades lined the block. The Pattersons with their constantly perfect lawn. The Mendes family with their cheerful little garden gnomes. Old Mr. Collins, who still hand-washed his vintage Cadillac every single Sunday. And then my house. My home. The sold sign was gone from the front yard, but something else was missing too. The warmth, the overwhelming feeling of belonging. It looked smaller somehow. Diminished. Eleanor parked across the street. "Do you want me to come with you?" I shook my head. "Just wait here. I will not be long." Using my cane for support, I made my way slowly up the driveway, painfully aware of the curious neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, exactly the way it always had. The porch steps squeaked in all the exact same spots. My key slid right into the lock and the heavy door swung open. I stepped into the entryway where I had welcomed guests for 40 years, where Zachary had taken his very first steps, where Robert and I had slow danced on our 25th anniversary when our stereo played our wedding song while we decorated the Christmas tree. The smell hit me first. An unfamiliar, expensive perfume mixed with harsh furniture polish. Then the visual changes registered. My comfortable old sofa was completely gone, replaced by a sleek modern sectional. The walls, once a warm beige, had been painted a stark, blinding white. All the family photos had been stripped away, replaced by generic abstract art. In just a few short weeks, they had already started erasing my entire existence. I drifted through the house like a ghost, taking in every single alteration with a strange, detached kind of grief. The kitchen featured brand new stainless steel appliances. The dining room had new modern light fixtures. My bedroom, Robert's and my private sanctuary, had been gutted and transformed into a home office. Our sturdy old bed was nowhere in sight. Only Zachary's childhood bedroom remained untouched, almost as if they could not quite decide what to do with it yet. His old baseball trophies were still lined up on the dusty shelves. The glow-in-the-dark constellation map still hung from the ceiling. The plastic stars faded after decades of watching over him in the dark. I sat down on the edge of his twin bed, running my hand over the faded Star Wars blanket he had insisted on keeping well into his teenage years. I had messed up somewhere in here. I had failed him somehow right inside these very four walls. The front door opened and Eleanor's voice echoed up the stairs. "Marilyn, are you okay? You have been in here a long time." "I am up here." I called back, my voice sounding much steadier than I actually felt. She appeared in the doorway, deep concern etched across her face. "Oh, honey, they changed everything." "Except this room," I pointed out. "It is almost as if they could not decide whether to completely erase him, too." Eleanor walked over and sat down beside me on the narrow mattress. People like that are always running away from something. They change things around to feel like they have some control. She patted my hand gently. But they cannot change what actually matters. The memories, the foundation, the love that built this place, that is all still here. I nodded, taking a deep, shaky breath. Yes, and tomorrow it will be all mine again. As we got ready to leave, I took one final look around Zachary's bedroom. Then I did something I had never done before. I pulled the door shut firmly and decisively. Some chapters need to be closed before new ones can properly begin. That night, back at Eleanor's place, we prepared for court. I laid out my navy blue suit, the exact same one I had worn to Robert's funeral. It hung a little loosely on me now after weeks of hospital food and endless stress. Eleanor meticulously ironed the jacket while I went over my notes with Samuel on the phone. "Judge Hannigan is fair, but she is very strictly by the book," he advised me. "Answer her questions directly. Do not elaborate unless she specifically asks you to. And remember, this is just a preliminary hearing to establish temporary control of the property until the full case is fully resolved." "Will they be there?" I asked. "The Reynolds family, Marcus, and his high-priced lawyer, yes. Olivia is not legally required to attend." "And any sign of Zachary?" Samuel hesitated. "Nothing concrete yet, but the bank has uncovered a few leads regarding the wire transfers, offshore accounts in Belize and Panama. The federal authorities are officially involved now." After I hung up, Eleanor brought me a steaming mug of chamomile tea. "All set for tomorrow." "As ready as I will ever be," I said, accepting the hot mug with immense gratitude. We sat together in comfortable silence, the heavy weight of tomorrow's hearing hanging in the air between us. "What are you going to do?" Eleanor finally asked. "When you get the house back?" It was a question I had been actively avoiding. The house did not feel like the home I remembered anymore. Too much had been altered both in the physical space and in my own heart. "I honestly don't know," I admitted. "Live there, I suppose, reclaim it somehow, or maybe sell it," Eleanor suggested gently. "On your own terms this time. Start totally fresh somewhere without all those heavy memories." The thought had certainly crossed my mind, but it felt a bit like surrendering, like letting Zachary win. "One step at a time," I said. "First I get it back, then I will decide what to do with it." I dreamed about the house again that night. Not the way it looked right now, or even the way it had looked when Zachary was a little boy. I dreamed of it as it could be. The walls freshly painted in bright, warm colors, brand new furniture handpicked by me, grandchildren I had never even met running down the hallways, filling the space with light and laughter. A future, not just a past. I woke up feeling strangely hopeful. Despite everything, the morning of the court date dawned perfectly clear and bright. I dressed with meticulous care, applied minimal makeup, and pinned my silver hair up into a neat, elegant bun. The woman staring back at me in the mirror looked a little older than I remembered, but her eyes were clear, sharp, and intensely determined. "You look formidable," Eleanor declared, reaching out to adjust my collar, "like a woman who does not take nonsense from anybody." Samuel met us at the courthouse, a heavy briefcase in his hand and a confident look on his face. "Great news," he said as we walked down the polished hallway toward the courtroom. "The bank successfully froze one of the offshore accounts. Roughly half of the money Zachary took from Olivia has been secured. They are still tracking down the other half, but this is major progress." Inside the courtroom, Marcus Reynolds and his corporate lawyer were already seated at a wide oak table. Marcus gave me a stiff nod when he saw me, his expression completely unreadable. Samuel guided me over to the opposing table, helping me lean my cane against the back of the chair before laying out his thick stack of documents with practiced precision. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Hannigan walked in, a stern-looking woman in her 60s wearing silver-rimmed glasses and projecting a no-nonsense air of total efficiency. What followed was simultaneously more straightforward and far more emotional than I had ever anticipated. Samuel laid out our case concisely. The expired power of attorney, the forged signatures, and the specific trust provisions that fully invalidated the property transfer. Marcus's lawyer largely agreed with the facts, admitting that the Reynolds Investment Trust had entered into the real estate transaction in good faith. However, they now recognized the sale as blatantly fraudulent, given the defendant's sudden flight and the glaring evidence of forgery. "Very well," Judge Hannigan said, her voice echoing through the quiet room. "I am issuing a temporary order, returning full possession of the property located at 1487 Maple Street to Mrs. Cooper, effective immediately. The funds from the fraudulent sale will remain entirely frozen until a final resolution is reached. Your firm's claim for restitution will be fully addressed at the comprehensive hearing." She peered over her glasses, looking directly at me. And while this grants you immediate legal possession, Mrs. Cooper, I strongly advise you not to make any permanent structural changes to the property until the final hearing. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor, I replied, keeping my voice remarkably steady despite the massive wave of emotion rising in my throat. Excellent. We will reconvene for the full hearing next month. Just like that, my home was officially mine again. Outside the courtroom doors, Marcus Reynolds approached us, his lawyer hovering nervously a few feet away. Mrs. Cooper, he said formally, I want to reiterate that if I had known the true circumstances, I never would have proceeded with the purchase. I believe you, I said flatly. Your mistake was trusting my son, just like mine was. A flicker of something, perhaps genuine understanding, crossed his stern face. My legal team will continue cooperating fully with the federal authorities to track him down and recover all the stolen funds. Thank you. He hesitated for a second, then added, Olivia asked me to tell you that she is truly sorry about everything. I gave a small nod, accepting the apology for exactly what it was. Imperfect, indirect, but sincere. As he walked away, Eleanor appeared right at my side. Ready to go home? She asked. Home. Such an incredibly complicated word now. Yes, I said softly. I think I am. Samuel handed me a set of shiny new keys in the courthouse parking lot. The locks were fully changed yesterday exactly as you requested. The small metal keys felt heavy in the palm of my hand. They were powerful symbols of recovery, of boundaries finally restored. Thank you, Samuel, for absolutely everything. He smiled, a flash of genuine warmth breaking through his polished professional demeanor. You are a truly remarkable woman, Marilyn. Most people would have completely crumbled under this kind of betrayal, but you fought back. I had a lot of help, I said, glancing over at Eleanor. Well, my part is mostly done for the time being, Samuel told me. The criminal complaint has been officially filed. The property is legally yours again. We will have the final wrap-up hearing in a few weeks, but at this point, that is largely just a formality. As he turned to walk toward his car, I called out to him, Samuel, the money that Zachary took from Olivia, from her personal accounts. What happens with all of that? He turned back around. Legally speaking, that is strictly between the two of them. As his wife, she is legally entitled to marital assets. But given the specific circumstances and his sudden disappearance, it is very complicated. Life usually is, I finished for him. He agreed with a slight knowing smile. Eleanor drove me back to the house, my house once again. This time, we didn't park across the street. We pulled straight into the driveway right where I belonged. Do you want me to come inside with you? She asked. Actually, I said slowly, I think I really need to do this part alone. But you can come back in a couple of hours. Bring some dinner. She squeezed my hand tight. Of course. Chinese or pizza. Chinese from Golden Dragon, the usual order with extra sweet and sour sauce on the side. Give me a call if you need anything before then, she told me. Arthur Godfrey is on TV Land at 4 o'clock if you want to feel nostalgic. I smiled at the reference to the classic old variety show we both remembered fondly from our youth. I will keep that in mind. I watched her drive away, then turned to face the house. My house. Mine again. The new key slid perfectly smoothly into the lock. The heavy front door swung open with the exact same familiar creak, the one Robert had always promised he would fix but never actually got around to. I stepped into the grand entryway where so much life had happened, and I let the door click shut behind me. The silence wrapped around me. It was not the hostile, chilling silence of an invaded space, but the welcoming, peaceful quiet of a place finally at rest. I moved through the room slowly, not as a guest this time, but as the rightful owner. In the living room, I pulled the generic modern art right off the walls, stacking the canvases carelessly in a corner. In the kitchen, I ran my hand over the sleek new stainless steel appliances. They were actually quite nice. I might just keep them. My old refrigerator had been making a terrible rattling noise for years anyway. Upstairs, I stopped right in front of Zachary's childhood bedroom. The door remained tightly shut exactly the way I had left it yesterday. I decided to leave it that way for now, in the master bedroom. My bedroom. I critically examined the stark home office setup. The massive desk would absolutely have to go. The metal filing cabinets, too. I wanted my bed back. I wanted my sanctuary back. As I made mental notes on how to restore every single space, I realized something very important. I wasn't trying to meticulously recreate the past. I was actively imagining a future. My future right here in this house that had already seen so much life. I made my way to the basement door, incredibly grateful that my knee had healed enough to handle the stairs. Taking them slowly, one exact step at a time, I descended into the cool darkness and flipped the light switch. The basement was entirely untouched. Apparently, Zachary and Olivia hadn't made it quite this far in their grand renovation plans, and there pushed neatly against the far back wall were my sturdy storage boxes. They were all neatly labeled in my own handwriting. Christmas decorations, old photo albums, Robert's things. And right next to them, draped under an old white sheet, was the unmistakable outline of our bed. The heavy queen-sized oak frame that Robert had insisted on buying for our 10th anniversary. A solid bed for a solid marriage, he used to say. He was always the romantic, hiding behind a deeply practical exterior. I pulled the dusty sheet back, revealing the beautiful headboard with its simple, elegant carvings. A thick layer of dust had settled on the wood, but otherwise it was absolutely perfect. It had just been waiting. Something tight loosened deep inside my chest. Not everything had been erased. Some things had merely been hidden away, just waiting to be rediscovered. I spent the next entire hour slicing open cardboard boxes, reacquainting myself with precious treasures I had assumed were lost forever. Robert's vintage baseball card collection from the 50s, our heavy wedding album filled with slightly faded color photographs, the beautiful hand-knitted blanket that had once wrapped a newborn Zachary, a precious gift from my mother who had passed away long before Robert did. When Eleanor finally arrived with dinner, she found me sitting halfway up the basement stairs, completely surrounded by open cardboard boxes, with the faint tracks of dried tears on my cheeks. "Oh no!" she said, sounding instantly alarmed. "What is wrong?" I smiled up at her. "Nothing is wrong. I found all my things. They didn't throw them in the trash, they just packed them away." She set the heavy bags of takeout food down and looked around at the scattered memorabilia. "Wow, look at that. Small mercies, I suppose." "It is more than that," I said, standing up with only a slight wince from my healing knee. "It is a sign that the past is not completely gone. It is just waiting to be integrated into the present." Eleanor rolled her eyes with deep affection. Always the philosopher. "Come on, the food is getting cold and I'm absolutely starving. You can philosophize all you want after we eat." We ate in the kitchen, perched on tall stools next to the shiny new granite countertops. Eleanor had brought a nice bottle of white wine, and we raised our glasses to toast to fresh new beginnings. "So," she said between bites of spicy kung pao chicken, "what is the big master plan, restoration, renovation, revolution?" I laughed out loud. "A little bit of all three, I think. Keep the things that work. Change the things that do not. Make the house mine again, but different." "Do you need a roommate?" she asked casually. "My house is getting way too big for just me. My arthritis is making the stairs a real challenge." The sudden offer caught me completely off guard. Eleanor and I had been best friends for decades, but living together was something we had never once discussed. "Are you being serious?" She shrugged her shoulders, trying to look nonchalant, but failing entirely. "Why not? We are both single. Big houses are expensive to maintain. And quite frankly, after everything that just happened, I really don't like the idea of you rattling around in this big place all by yourself. I really thought about it. Having Eleanor live here would definitely change the dynamic, but maybe a big change was exactly what this house needed right now. Fresh energy, new memories. Let me think about it, I said warmly. It is definitely not a bad idea. No pressure at all, she assured me. Just throwing it out there as an option. I am not getting any younger, and neither are you. Those AARP commercials about seniors moving in together are starting to make a lot of sense these days. After dinner, we walked through the entire house together, actively planning which heavy furniture to move first, which stark walls to repaint, and which modern fixtures to replace. You know what this place really needs? Eleanor said while we stood in the blindingly white living room. Color, life. It looks like a sterile hospital ward in here right now. You are absolutely right, I agreed. I am thinking some warm yellows, maybe a touch of terracotta, colors with a real pulse. Perfect. And plants, lots and lots of plants, just like we had back in the 70s. Do you remember that massive spider plant you had that totally took over the dining room? How could I ever forget it? I laughed. Robert used to call it the Day of the Triffids. We were still actively debating design possibilities when the doorbell unexpectedly rang. We exchanged a highly puzzled look. Nobody knew I was officially back in the house yet. I walked cautiously over to the front door and peeked through the small peephole. My breath caught in my throat. Olivia was standing alone on my front porch, her arms wrapped tightly around her chest, as if she was freezing even though the evening air was perfectly mild. I opened the heavy door very slowly. Olivia. Mrs. Cooper. She said, her voice sounding incredibly small. I really hope I am not intruding. That heavily depends on why you are here. She looked down at her shoes, then back up, meeting my eyes with what looked like a genuinely massive effort. I came to return something that belongs to you. From her designer handbag, she pulled out a small, worn velvet box. My heart leaped into my throat the second I recognized it. It was my mother's antique jewelry box, the exact one that had sat safely on my bedroom dresser for decades. I took it when we were packing up to leave, she admitted quietly. I shouldn't have done it. It obviously wasn't part of the house's furnishings. I accepted the small box without saying a word, popping the lid open to find my mother's classic pearl earrings and the beautiful sapphire pendant Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary, right where they belonged. Thank you, I finally said. This means a great deal to me. She gave a small nod and turned around to leave, but I found myself calling out to her. Olivia, would you like to come inside? Just for a moment. Pure surprise flashed across her face, followed quickly by deep uncertainty. Are you absolutely sure? Yes, I said, genuinely surprised to find that I actually meant it. Eleanor raised one highly skeptical eyebrow as Olivia stepped tentatively into the entryway, but she didn't voice an objection. She simply said, I will go put the kettle on for some tea, and quickly disappeared into the kitchen. I led Olivia into the living room where we sat down on opposite ends of the massive modern sectional that still dominated the room. How are you holding up? I asked. She let out a harsh, completely humorless laugh. Honestly terrible. Divorced after exactly 3 weeks of marriage. Back to living in my childhood bedroom with my parents. Trying to explain to absolutely everyone why my brand new husband vanished into thin air with all our money. She twisted her hands nervously in her lap. But I did not come here looking for sympathy. Why are you here, Olivia? Besides returning my jewelry, she took a very deep, shaky breath. To apologize to you properly, face to face. What happened to you was so incredibly wrong, and I was a part of it. Even if I did not know the full extent of the fraud, I should have asked more questions. I should have insisted on getting to know you properly. I should have questioned why everything felt so incredibly rushed. I studied her closely. This young woman who had been so eager to claim my house, my son, and a future built entirely on a crumbling foundation. There was genuine raw regret in her eyes now. And something else, too, a brand new caution. Perhaps some very hard lessons learned the painful way. "We all should have done things very differently," I finally said softly, myself included. Eleanor returned carrying 3 steaming mugs of tea. She settled herself comfortably into the armchair directly facing us, wearing an expression that clearly communicated she was not about to miss a single second of this conversation. "Have you heard from him at all?" I asked. "Since he ran off," Olivia shook her head. "Nothing. The police think he might be hiding out in Costa Rica. They said something about tracking his credit card charges." She hesitated for a moment. "Have you heard from him?" "No," I said quietly. "Just the letter he left behind blaming absolutely everyone but himself." "Classic Zachary," she muttered under her breath. Then she looked up, suddenly looking alarmed. "Oh, I am so sorry. That was accurate." I finished for her. Painfully accurate. A tiny ghost of a smile touched the corners of her lips. "You know, in another lifetime, one where your son wasn't a total con artist and my dad wasn't so incredibly desperate to save his failing company, I think we actually could have gotten along really well. We still might," I found myself saying out loud, "not as family perhaps, but as 2 people who managed to survive the exact same terrible storm." She blinked rapidly, fighting hard against a sudden wave of tears. "I would really like that." After she finally left, Eleanor turned to me with both eyebrows raised to her hairline. "Well then, that was certainly unexpected." "Absolutely everything about this entire situation has been unexpected," I said as I locked the front door. "I am just learning how to adapt." I slept in the guest room that night, lying on the expensive sheets that Olivia had left behind. The master bedroom would simply have to wait until my own bed was carried up from the basement. But even in this weird transitional state in this house that felt both deeply familiar and completely foreign, I slept more soundly than I had in weeks. I was home. It wasn't the exact same house, but it was home nonetheless. The weeks that followed settled into a steady, comforting rhythm of recovery and intense renovation. Eleanor boxed up her clothes and personal items and officially moved in. Together we repainted the sterile living room, a warm, inviting butter yellow. We rehung all the family photos and rearranged the layout, keeping a few of the nicer modern pieces, while bringing back some of my favorite old antiques. My solid oak bed was fully restored to the master bedroom, freshly polished and dressed in beautiful new linens. The modern stainless steel appliances stayed in the kitchen, but my colorful collection of hand-painted coffee mugs returned to their rightful place on the open shelves. Room by room, the house completely transformed. Not back into exactly what it used to be, but into something brand new. Something that honored the deep past while fully embracing the present. Through all of this, Zachary's bedroom door remained firmly shut. I just was not quite ready to face that specific space yet, to decide what to do with the lingering remnants of my son's childhood while he was still out there somewhere, actively running away from the consequences of his own actions. Exactly 1 month after I reclaimed the house, I received an unexpected phone call from Samuel. "They finally tracked him down," he said without any preamble. "Zachary is in Panama." My heart completely stopped. Have they arrested him yet? Not yet. There are some incredibly tricky extradition complications, but the authorities have successfully frozen his remaining offshore assets. He's not going to get very far. I sank heavily into one of the kitchen chairs, a massive whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. Relief, deep sadness. A very strange, hollow sense of closure. What happens now? "Well, that partially depends on you," Samuel said very carefully. "The criminal charges are proceeding independently, but if you wanted to speak with him before things escalate any further, it is possible. The federal authorities have his local burner number. They are willing to facilitate a brief phone call given the unique circumstances. I closed my eyes tightly, actively picturing that awful conversation. What on earth would I even say to the son who had betrayed me so completely? What could he possibly say in return? I need some time to think about it, I told Samuel. After I hung up the phone, I sat alone in the quiet kitchen for a very long time, watching the late afternoon light drift slowly across the freshly painted walls. Then I called out for Eleanor. "If you could talk to him," she asked, after I fully explained the bizarre situation. "What would you even say?" "I genuinely do not know," I admitted. A part of me really wants to demand to know why, but another part of me absolutely refuses to listen to any more of his pathetic excuses. "Do you really need the closure, Marilyn, or do you already have it?" That was the real question. By fighting back, reclaiming my house, and actively rebuilding my life, had I already found the resolution I desperately needed? I think, I said slowly, that I need to hear his voice one last time. Not for his sake, for mine. The very next day, with all the proper arrangements carefully made through official channels, I sat stiffly in Samuel's office, waiting for the secure international call to connect. Samuel had politely offered to step out, but I asked him to stay. I wanted a witness, someone entirely objective to hear whatever was about to be said. The speakerphone rang, once, twice, 3 times. Then, "Hello." It was Zachary's voice, slightly distorted by the long distance, but utterly unmistakable. It was the exact same voice that had once called me Mommy and begged me for bedtime stories. Now it just sounded guarded, defensive, and scared. "Zachary," I said, my own voice sounding much steadier than I expected. "It is Mom." A heavy pause, then instantly on the defensive. "Did they tell you where I am? Are the cops there?" And just like that, no proper greeting, no "how are you?" Just selfish self-preservation exactly as always. "I am sitting in my lawyer's office," I said. "And yes, I know you are in Panama. The federal authorities know it too." He cursed softly under his breath. "Look, I do not have a lot of time. What do you want?" What did I want? The question echoed loudly in my mind. To understand, to forgive, to condemn. "I want to understand," I finally said out loud. "Why Zachary? Why on earth did you do this?" He sighed heavily, a burst of harsh static crackling over the phone line. "Does it really matter now? It is already done." "It matters to me." Another pause, a longer one this time, then spoken very grudgingly. "I needed the money. Olivia's father was putting massive pressure on us. He told me that if I could bring real assets to the table, he would give me a major position at his firm, executive level. It was finally a real chance to actually be somebody." "You were already somebody," I said quietly. "You were my son." "Yeah, well, that was never really enough, was it, Dad's golden boy who never quite measured up?" The raw disappointment, the crushing failure, the deep bitterness in his voice genuinely surprised me. "Is that really how you saw yourself? Because that is certainly not how I ever saw you." "Really? Then why did you completely stop helping me? Why did you say no when I desperately needed that business loan last year?" "Because it was the 5th loan, Zachary. Because you never bothered to pay back any of the others. Because throwing cash at problems never actually solves them." "Easy for you to say," he muttered. "Your life was perfectly sorted out. The house was entirely paid off. You had massive savings. What did I ever have?" "You had endless opportunities," I fired back. "An expensive education, loving support, absolutely everything we could possibly give you." "Not everything," he snapped sharply. "Not Dad's actual approval, not your unconditional financial backing when I needed it the absolute most." I took a very deep breath, quickly recognizing that the conversation was rapidly devolving into our toxic old patterns. This was not why I had agreed to the call. Zachary listened to me very carefully. What you did was completely wrong. Not just legally, but morally. You blatantly stole from me. You forged legal documents. You totally took advantage of my absolute trust. I know, he said, surprising me. Okay, I know it was wrong, but I was totally desperate. And now you are still desperate, hiding out in Panama with stolen money. He did not respond immediately. When he finally did, his voice was much quieter. I screwed up. I get it. But I cannot come back to the States now. They will arrest me. Yes, I agreed flatly. They probably will. Actions have real consequences, Zachary, even for you. So that is it. Then you are just abandoning your only son. The emotional manipulation was so incredibly transparent that it almost made me laugh. Almost. No, Zachary, you abandoned me. You abandoned me the second you decided that my home, my lifelong possessions, and my very autonomy were yours to just take. When you arrogantly decided that your wants were somehow more important than my basic rights. Mom, I am not finished, I said firmly. I want you to know something. I got the house back. I am living in it right now. I am making it mine again. I have officially filed criminal charges against you, and I am absolutely not dropping them. Whatever happens next is entirely up to the authorities and the court system. Are you really going to let them throw me in a jail cell? His voice fully cracked a tiny sliver of genuine raw fear, breaking right through his usual bravado. I am going to let the justice system run its proper course, I said, because I love you enough to firmly believe that you desperately need to face the consequences. This is what real love actually looks like sometimes, not shielding someone from the results of their terrible choices, but forcing them to learn from them. The silence stretched out endlessly between us, thousands of miles of distance and an absolutely immeasurable emotional divide. Is that it? He finally asked, his voice entirely flat. One more thing, I said. I forgive you. He scoffed loudly. Sure you do. Not for your sake, I clarified sharply. For mine. Carrying around all this deep anger and betrayal is a far too heavy burden. So I am putting it down. I am letting it go. Whatever you choose to do with that forgiveness, whether you try to earn it or whether you choose to value it, that is entirely your choice. I could hear him breathing heavily. I could almost picture him pacing back and forth in some cheap, rented Panamanian apartment, completely trapped by his own terrible decisions. Goodbye, Zachary, I said softly. I truly hope that someday you find your way back, not to me, not to the house, but back to yourself, back to the person you could have been. I hung up the phone before he could even respond, before he could attempt one more manipulation or offer one more pathetic excuse. Samuel, who had remained perfectly silent throughout the entire phone call, looked at me with something very close to pure admiration. You handled that incredibly well, he said. Far better than most people ever would. I said exactly what I needed to say, I replied. Whether he actually heard it or not, that is completely beyond my control. As I walked out of the office building, I felt significantly lighter somehow. Not happy exactly. The situation was still a massive tragedy. The familial losses were still incredibly real. But the brief conversation had given me something I had not even realized I desperately needed. Not closure, but profound clarity. My son had made his choices. I had made mine. And now we would both have to live with the harsh results. The final court hearing came and went with very little drama. Judge Hannigan officially ruled on what had already been set into motion. The house was fully legally mine. The fraudulent sale was entirely voided. The severe criminal charges against Zachary were officially proceeding through the proper legal channels. Marcus Reynolds attended the hearing, offering me a stiff, formal nod across the quiet courtroom. His massive development firm had successfully recouped the vast majority of their lost money through aggressive insurance claims and rapid legal action against Zachary's remaining frozen assets. Our paths would likely never cross again. Olivia was there as well, sitting very quietly in the back row. She approached me after it was over, looking much more grounded than I remembered. She looked less polished, but somehow far more substantial. "It is officially over then," she said. "Legally, at least." "Yes," I agreed, although I heavily suspect the emotional part takes quite a bit longer. She smiled very faintly. "I am learning that exact lesson day by day. What are you going to do now? Start over?" I asked, genuinely curious about her plans. "I am actually going back to school, law school to be exact." She shrugged her shoulders at my highly surprised expression. This entire awful experience made me really want to understand the legal system better. Maybe I can help other people who have been terribly taken advantage of. That is both unexpected and deeply admirable. "Well," she said softly, "I had a pretty great example of exactly how to stand up and fight back, even when it is incredibly hard." She looked away for a second, then looked back at me. "Would it be okay if I called you sometimes? Not as family. Just as, I don't know, someone who actually understands." I thought about it for a moment, then gave a firm nod. "I would really like that." Exactly 2 months after reclaiming my house, I stood right in front of the closed door to Zachary's old bedroom. It was finally time. Eleanor stood right beside me, solid and deeply supportive as always. She had officially moved her things in 3 weeks earlier, taking over the spacious guest bedroom as her own, and quickly filling the old house with her booming laughter and highly opinionated commentary. The unconventional living arrangement worked beautifully. We gave each other space when we needed it, pleasant company when we wanted it, and a deep sense of security that living entirely alone simply could not provide. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. I nodded and turned the brass doorknob. The room looked exactly as I had left it that terrible day, completely frozen in time. It was a dusty shrine to the young boy Zachary used to be. Old shiny baseball trophies, faded science fair ribbons, torn posters of rock bands that had disbanded decades ago. "What are you going to do with all of this stuff?" Eleanor asked. I moved over toward the window, pulling the heavy curtains wide open to let the bright sunlight pour in. After months of lingering darkness, tiny dust motes danced beautifully in the golden beams. "Some things I will carefully pack away," I said gently, touching a framed photograph of Zachary at his high school graduation, his bright eyes filled with endless promise. "Some things I am just going to let go, and the room itself. I think it is finally time for a major change." "What kind of change?" I turned around, examining the large space with totally fresh eyes. "Something that looks firmly toward the future. An art studio, maybe. I have always wanted to try my hand at painting." Eleanor grinned widely. "I can definitely picture that. Great natural light. A quiet, peaceful space. Plenty of room for a large wooden easel right by the window." "And what about you?" I asked. "Is there a room in this house you would like to completely transform?" She considered the question. "That massive formal dining room downstairs that we never actually use. That could be a really beautiful private library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves along the walls. A couple of extremely comfortable reading chairs." "Perfect," I agreed happily. "This house definitely has enough room for both of our dreams." Later that afternoon, as we were actively sorting through Zachary's old belongings, making separate piles to keep to donate to charity or to throw in the trash, I found his childhood diary hidden securely behind the heavy wooden dresser. The tiny metal lock had been broken off a very long time ago. The lined pages were yellowed and brittle with age. I hesitated. I deeply respected the privacy of the innocent young boy he had once been, but I was also desperately searching to understand the deeply flawed man he had ultimately become. In the end, I placed the small book completely unread into the keep box. Some mysteries are honestly better left entirely unexplored. Some answers wouldn't actually change the questions that truly mattered anyway. That evening, we sat together on the back porch, watching the beautiful sunset paint the sky in vibrant shades of amber and rose. Eleanor had hung a set of beautiful wind chimes from the wooden eaves, their soft melodic chiming carried by the gentle evening breeze. "Do you think he will ever come back?" she asked softly, breaking the comfortable silence. Zachary. I considered the heavy question, quietly watching a pair of bright red cardinals flutter playfully between the branches of the massive maple tree. I genuinely do not know. The federal authorities are still actively hunting him down. Even if he somehow manages to evade them forever, actually facing his actions would require a specific type of deep bravery that I am just not sure he actually possesses. And if he did, come back, I mean, then we would simply have to find a brand new path forward, I said firmly, not as we used to be, but exactly as we are right now. Eleanor nodded in complete understanding. In the meantime, I smiled, raising my glass of iced tea and a toast. In the meantime, we live, we create, we move forward. She clinked her cold glass directly against mine. To strictly moving forward. And to this incredible house, I added. Not just a structure made of wood and stone, but a true home once again, filled to the brim with friendship, absolute honesty, and second chances. As the purple twilight deepened slowly around us, I felt a profound sense of deep peace settle over my shoulders, like a very familiar, comfortable blanket. The harsh betrayal still completely hurt. The familial loss was still undeniably real, but those painful things no longer fully defined me. What defined me right now was my pure resilience, the sheer strength to completely rebuild, the hard-earned wisdom to deeply value what remained, and the courage to finally let go of what had been lost. My son had arrogantly tried to take my house foolishly, thinking it was nothing more than a piece of valuable property. But in doing so, he had accidentally given me something totally unexpected. He gave me the incredible opportunity to reclaim not just my physical home, but myself. And that was a solid foundation that absolutely nobody could ever steal. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you ever gone through something similar? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed my story, make sure to check out 2 other favorites from the channel. My daughter-in-law said I was too old to babysit my grandkids. And after 40 years of marriage, my husband left me for his secretary.